you're here to rest. Whatever kind of day you've had, busy or slow, noisy or strangely quiet, it can all wait for later. For the next while, you don't have to solve anything, remember anything, or keep up with anyone. You can just lie where you are, feel the weight of the blankets over you, and let your breathing fall into a softer, slower rhythm. As your body settles, your mind begins a different kind of journey, one that doesn't need tickets or bags or alarms. It's the kind of journey that begins simply by listening. Tonight, you're walking into a very old city. A city that stood thousands of years before your own life began. A city that has puzzled historians for more than a century. Its name is Mohenjo-Daro. In the language used by many who study it today, that name means something like the Mound of the Dead. But you're not arriving here in fear or dread. You're arriving as a quiet visitor in the cool softness of night, long after the busy heat of the Indus Valley day has faded. You don't arrive with a jolt. There's no sudden flash or door or machine. One moment you're listening to the sound of your own breath, and the next you're standing at the edge of an ancient street under a sky scattered with unfamiliar stars. The air is warm, but not stifling. It carries the faintest trace of river mud and baked clay, the smell of a city built brick by brick from the earth that surrounds it. Somewhere out in the darkness, beyond the low shapes of the houses, the Indus River moves with its slow, heavy song, unseen but always present. You stand still for a moment and simply look. Mohenjo-Daro doesn't tower upward like some ancient cities you may imagine. There are no sharp stone pyramids cutting into the sky, no huge palace walls rearing above everything else, no royal statue staring down at you from a high platform. Instead, the city lies around you in calm, careful lines. Streets run straight, crossing one another at honest right angles, like threads in a woven cloth. On either side of the street, low houses rise from the ground, made of the same baked bricks that form the road under your feet. The bricks are small and regular, each almost exactly like its neighbor. Someone, long ago, decided on a standard size, and that decision spread quietly through workshop after workshop until the whole city was built on the same simple pattern. You take a step, then another. The brick street is solid beneath your feet, still warm from the day's sun, but slowly giving that warmth back into the night. To your left, a house wall comes up close to the street. You reach out and rest your fingertips against the bricks. They are rough, but not sharp, edges softened by time. In some places, the mortar between them has crumbled a little, leaving thin gaps where shadows collect. You can feel the memory of many days in those walls, heat, rain, dust, the quiet pressure of years. Above you, the houses don't bloom. Most are just 1 or 2 stories tall, square and modest. Some have flat roofs where people once sat in the evenings to feel the breeze. You imagine clay jars up there, low benches, sleeping mats rolled up until night. It's late now. The people who once lived here are long gone, and even in their own time, this hour would have been one of rest. Cooking fires banked low, doorways closed, the city wrapped in sleep. Tonight, you can move through it without disturbing anyone. You are light as a thought, passing through another century. You walk slowly because everything here rewards slowness. Soon you notice something running along the edge of the street, darker than the brick around it, a narrow channel neatly lined. You follow it with your eyes and realize it runs the whole length of the road, dipping slightly, then rising, then dipping again. At regular intervals, it disappears under the street, passing through carefully placed bricks, then emerging on the other side. This is one of Mohenjo-Daro's quiet marvels. A drainage system that winds under and beside the streets, carrying used water away from homes, keeping the city clean and the air sweeter than it might otherwise be. In the daytime, water from bathing areas and washing places would have trickled into these channels, flowing down slight slopes, guided by the steady, practical intelligence of the city's planners. No single person's glory is carved into the bricks. No king's name is stamped into the drains. Yet the work is precise, thoughtful, and patient. You kneel for a moment beside one of the covers. Some are made from large, flat bricks laid over the channel like lids. Others are stone slabs shaped to fit the gap exactly. You run your hand along the edge of one cover and feel the almost perfect straightness of it, the way it meets its neighbor in a clean line. Someone lifted this slab and set it here. Someone cut it or shaped it. Someone checked the angle so that water would flow, but not too quickly. No one knows their names now. They left no statue, no triumphal inscription. But their work is still here, solid under your fingertips. You rise again and continue down the street. Every few houses, you notice something else that repeats, a dark rectangle in the ground, brick-lined, opening downward. A well. Mohenjo-Daro is full of them, more than any other ancient city discovered from this time. Some sit in the courtyards of private homes, some stand beside the street, where anyone might have drawn water. You step closer to one now. Its circular wall of bricks rises to waist height. You rest your hands on its rim and look down. The interior bricks descend in a gentle spiral of darkness. You can't see water at the bottom, night hides it, but you can imagine the coolness gathered there, far below the warmth of the surface. You think of the hands that once pulled rope here, the creak of wooden pulleys, the splash of a heavy clay jar dropping into water, then rising, wet and dripping, the rope digging slightly into palms as someone lifted it up. In this city, it seems, water and cleanliness belonged to everyone. Wells were shared, drains were shared. The logic of the place is not of a single palace hoarding comfort at the center, but of comfort spread gently along every street, seeping into every household. You begin to walk again, turning into a narrower side lane. The main street's straight lines give way to a more intimate path. Houses press closer. The sky narrows to a soft strip of stars overhead. Your footsteps sound slightly different here, echoing more softly between the walls. On your right, a doorway opens into a small courtyard. The wooden door that once hung here is gone. Only the stone threshold remains, its upper surface worn smooth by countless feet. You step over it, careful and quiet, and enter the courtyard. The space is simple. 4 walls surrounding a small, open square under the sky. In one corner, You see a raised platform built from bricks, flat on top, its edges carefully aligned. In another corner, near the wall, you glimpse a rectangle of slightly different brickwork, perhaps the edge of a bathing area, where water once flowed down into the drain you saw outside. You stand in the center of the courtyard and imagine the house around you as it once was. In your mind, the empty doorways fill in. A low fire burns in a small cooking room, its smoke drifting lazily toward a vent. A sleeping room holds mats and woven blankets, clay pots stacked neatly along one wall, a small shelf carved into the brick with oil lamps resting in it. The air is no longer silent. You hear the imagined murmur of voices' soft conversation in an old language that no one can read today, though its marks survive on tiny seals and fragments of pottery. The sounds don't need to be translated. You feel their meaning in tone alone. Simple talk of grain and weather, of the day's trade, of children's small arguments, of relatives in another part of the city. You picture a woman stepping out into this courtyard, bare feet touching cool brick, her bangles giving a faint musical clink as she lifts a pot to fetch water from the well. You picture a child chasing a rolling toy, its wheels rattling over the ground, laughter bouncing off the walls. This isn't a royal hall. There are no carved lions, no gold inlay, no towering pillars meant to astonish. And yet, the care in its construction is evident everywhere. Someone planned this house, not as a one-room shelter thrown together in a rush, but as a comfortable space for people to live, wash, cook, sleep, and breathe. You tilt your head back and look at the slice of night sky above. Stars hang there in patterns, older even than this old city. Somewhere, unseen, a breeze moves along the rooftops, slipping over the lip of the courtyard to stir the air. You feel it as a soft brush on your face. Mohenjo-Daro from this angle doesn't feel like a mystery to be solved. It feels like a place where ordinary people once lived carefully designed lives. And yet there is a mystery here, a gentle question that hums like a low note beneath the quiet. For all the city's sophistication, for its bricks and drains and wells and neat streets, there is something missing. No obvious palace, no huge royal tomb, no temple towering above everything else, announcing the gods of the city and the power of their priests. Archaeologists have dug here for decades, brushing dust from brick, mapping streets, measuring rooms, studying thousands of tiny objects. Beads, tools, pottery, seals. They have found the great bath, large granaries, wide streets, workshops, but not the throne room of a king, not the carved reliefs boasting of victories in war, not a single statue grandly labeled as ruler of all. You rest your palm on the courtyard wall and think about that. In many ancient cities, you could stand in one place and point without hesitation to where power lived. The palace on the hill, the massive temple in the center, the fortress towering above the houses. Here, that pointing gesture has nowhere obvious to land. The city seems to say, our importance is in the pattern of everything, not in one single building. Our pride is in drains that work, streets that run straight, brick sizes that match. You leave the quiet courtyard and step back into the lane. As you walk, you notice how similar many of the houses are in size. Some are a little bigger, some a little smaller, but there are no vast mansions swallowing entire blocks, no clusters of tiny shacks crushed against the walls of something grand. The differences exist, but they are gentle, not dramatic. It's as if the city planners wanted things to be balanced, as if they believed that comfort should not be kept behind a single high wall, but spread, street by street, throughout the city. You turn another corner and find yourself on a slightly broader road. The air feels more open here. In the distance, you can just make out the outline of what archaeologists call the Citadel Mound, a raised area with important public buildings. It doesn't loom like a castle. It rises with a certain steady, rectangular calm, like a platform built for gatherings, for storage, for public baths. In time, you'll walk there too. You'll stand by the great bath, where people once purified themselves in clear water, and you'll trace the edges of the granaries that may have held grain for the city. There, you'll feel even more strongly the strange quiet of Mohenjo-Daro's missing palace. But not yet. For now, you stay here in the lower city, among the houses and narrow lanes, where daily life unfolded in countless small scenes. The place where the mystery of no palaces really begins, because the question isn't only where was the king, but also what was this society like if no king needed a palace at all. You pause at a junction where two streets cross. One runs north-south, the other east-west. Their lines so straight they look almost modern. The corners of the blocks are sharp, the alignments precise. Under the starlight, they look like lines drawn by a patient hand on a clay tablet. A faint breeze moves along the streets, carrying tiny echoes. The imagined clop of carts on baked earth, merchants talking quietly as they close their shutters. Distant laughter from a rooftop gathering, children being called inside, the hum of an old song rising and falling like the river. You imagine yourself walking here when the city was alive, your feet crunching on dust, the sun bright overhead. You'd pass people whose jewelry was made not from dazzling gold crowns, but from carefully drilled beads of carnelian and faience, strung in intricate patterns around wrists and necks. You'd see seal makers carving tiny animals and symbols into stone squares, each one like a small, silent name. You'd hear the splash of water poured into drains, the thud of grain being ground, the regular beat of a potter's wheel. The city's wealth is not hidden in one building, it's scattered in these details, spread across streets, distributed into thousands of steady hands. You let that thought settle in your mind like fine dust on a quiet floor. A wealthy city without a visible king. A planned city without a palace. What does that feel like from the inside? Not as a puzzle for scholars, but as a way of life for the people who woke here every morning and slept here every night? To explore that, you'll walk through more of Mohenjo-Daro's neighborhoods. You'll visit its wells and its baths, its granaries and its workshops. You'll move through the city at the gentle pace of someone with nowhere urgent to be. For now, you take another slow breath, letting the warm night air of the Indus Valley slip into your lungs and back out again. Your shoulders loosen, your jaw softens. Here in the sleeping city, you are safe. No chariots thunder by, no armies march through the gates. There is only the steady grid of streets, the quiet memory of water in the drains, and the soft question that will guide you deeper into the story. How did a city this advanced, this organized, this rich, live without palaces and kings? You turn toward the shadowed rise of the Citadel Mound in the distance, ready to continue your slow, nighttime walk through Mohenjo-Daro. And with each step, the mystery grows softer, calmer, more like a lullaby than a riddle. You stand at the crossroads of the quiet lower city for a moment longer, letting your eyes adjust to the warm darkness. The streets around you are straight and steady, like lines drawn on a sleeping map. Then, slowly, you turn toward the dim rise of the Citadel Mound. Your feet begin to move. Not quickly. Just a slow, unhurried walk, the kind of walk you might take when you have nowhere in particular to be, and all the time in the world to arrive there. As you leave the narrow residential lanes, the city opens slightly. The houses thin and the streets feel wider. The air changes to less crowded by walls, a little freer, carrying a faint, cool breath that seems to drift down from the raised ground ahead. The Citadel Mound isn't a sharp peak. It's more like a broad, man-made hill, built up layer after layer from brick and earth. In the starlight, its edges are softened, but you can still see the straight cuts of terraces and platforms, the careful steps that climb toward the top. When you reach the base of the mound, you pause and rest a hand against the nearest wall. The bricks here are just like those in the lower city, small, rectangular, evenly made. There is no sudden switch to giant stone blocks, no shift to an entirely different material reserved only for sacred or royal ground. The same kind of hands shaped these bricks. The same gentle sense of proportion guides the lines. You find a stairway leading up. Each step is shallow and regular, worn just enough that your feet fall comfortably into place. As you climb, you feel the city fall slowly away beneath you, not in a dizzying drop, but in a calm, widening perspective. Halfway up, you pause and look back. Mohenjo-Daro stretches out in quiet rectangles and lines. Streets run straight toward the darkness, vanishing into soft shadow. Clusters of roof lines form a low, even horizon. In the faint light, the wells are small circles, the open courtyards, tiny squares of deeper darkness. From up here, you can see how balanced everything is. No one block is vastly larger than another. No single cluster of buildings dominates the skyline. The city looks less like a kingdom and more like a carefully woven fabric, each thread crossing another, forming a pattern that only makes sense when you see it as a whole. You turn back toward the top and take the last few steps, emerging onto a broad, brick-paved platform. The air feels slightly cooler up here, touched by a gentle movement of wind that brushes your face, lifts the edge of your clothes, and then settles again. Ahead of you, not far away, waits one of Mohenjo-Daro's most famous spaces, a large, sunken rectangle of darkness, ringed by brick. In the daytime, it would be easy to see its form. At night, you see it first as a change in texture, a sudden drop where the smooth paving gives way to an ordered hollow. You walk toward it, your footsteps echoing softly on the bricks. This is the Great Bath. You stand at the edge and look down. A wide pool is set deep into the ground, lined with finely cut bricks, sealed with a layer of ancient waterproof plaster. Broad steps descend into it from two sides, meeting the floor in gentle curves. Tonight, there is no water in the basin. Only darkness gathers there, smooth and still, like a memory of water that left long ago but never quite stopped being present. You kneel and brush your fingertips over the topmost step. The bricks are smoother here, polished by thousands of bare feet that once passed up and down, day after day, year after year. You can almost feel those footsteps in your fingers, the echo of weight, the warmth of skin, the slight dampness of wet soles. You imagine the bath in its living days. The pool filled with clear, cool water, perhaps drawn from a nearby well and carried in jars, or channeled through some clever system long since silenced. People descending the stairs in slow, careful lines, clothes folded and set aside on the platform. The light of the Indus sun, or the flame of nearby lamps catching ripples on the surface. Voices would have been quieter here, not absent, but hushed. The splash of someone stepping in, the soft sigh as water closed over shoulders, the murmur of conversation between friends, between relatives, between people who had seen each other in this place many times. In other ancient cities, great pools might belong to kings, places of display, of guarded privilege. But here, there is no throne beside the water, no carved relief shouting a single person's name, no royal veranda overlooking the bath where a ruler could stand above everyone else. The great bath sits like a calm heart inside the citadel, not crouched in the shadow of a palace, but surrounded by other public buildings, granaries, halls, storerooms. Its beauty is in its proportions, its careful engineering, and the simple idea that many people would pass through it again and again. You trace the line of a brick with your thumb and think about what that means. Maybe the water here was used in rituals, in ceremonies that cleaned not just the body, but the feeling of the day. Maybe people came before important events, washing away dust and worry, standing shoulder to shoulder in the cool pool. Whatever its exact purpose, the bath feels shared. Like the wells, like the drains, like the streets. Another piece of this city's comfort, not locked behind private walls, but set where many could use it. You rise slowly and walk along the edge of the pool. At one corner, you see the remains of a small brick chamber, perhaps a changing room, or a place where oil jars and cloths once waited. The doorway's threshold is smoothed by use. The wall shows faint curves where repeated touch polished the bricks. You picture hands reaching for jars, fingers tying knots in cloth, laughter at some small joke, the rustle of garments being folded, unfolded, shaken out to dry. Leaving the bath behind, you move across the citadel's top. The platform continues in a series of levels, small rises and drops of just a few steps each. The buildings here are larger than the houses below, but they share the same quiet language of straight walls and right angles. Not the kind that gleams from a crown or dazzles in jewelry, but the kind that fills stomachs and steadies hearts. In your mind, you fill this space again. Clay jars stand along the outer walls, their rounded sides cool and solid. Piles of wheat or barley wrapped in woven sacks, form low hills of stored sunlight in the center. Dust motes drift through shafts of light from roof openings. Men and women move carefully between the stacks, checking, counting, tying, untying, scooping grain into baskets to be carried to the city below. The smell is earthy and rich, a mixture of dried husks, woven fiber, sweat, and the faint sweetness of stored harvest. The sound is gentle, the soft hiss of grain pouring from one container to another, the creak of wood, the murmur of voices making sure nothing is spilled, nothing is lost. If there was a palace in this city, it might be somewhere like this, not a throne room of gold and stone, but a building full of food held in trust. A place where the wealth of the fields was gathered not to ornament one person's halls, but to secure the stomachs of many. You walk slowly along the length of the platform, your hand trailing lightly along the low walls. Each small compartment repeats the same shape: brick, right angle, over and over, like a mantra in architecture. There is something soothing in that repetition, something deeply steadying. Beyond the granary, another structure waits. This one is broad and open, its roof long gone, but its forest of brick bases still in place. In daylight, they look like stumps of columns, lined up in rows, suggesting a large pillared hall. At night, they are islands of shadow on a slightly raised floor. You step into the hall and move between them. Here, you imagine not jars, but people. Perhaps this was a gathering place, a public hall where merchants, elders, or community leaders met to discuss matters that concerned the whole city. Maybe waitstones were laid out here, each carefully calibrated cube or cylinder, ensuring that trade was fair. Maybe scribes sat cross-legged with clay tablets, pressing the tiny undeciphered signs of the Indus script into wet surfaces as agreements were made. You picture it slowly, so it stays soft, never sharp. The hum of many voices, overlapping like gentle waves. The solid presence of columns rising from these bases, supporting a roof that shaded everyone beneath from the harsh sun. The faint clink of standardized weights as they are lifted and set down. The smooth press of seal stones into clay, leaving tiny images of bulls, elephants, unicorn-like creatures, and mysterious signs. If there was power here, it may have looked like this: not a single figure raised above all, but a group of people seated at the same level, talking, listening, making decisions for a city that trusted its systems more than any one name. You rest your hand on one of the brick bases and feel its quiet solidity. In so many histories, power announces itself loudly in statues, in inscriptions, in monuments that shout one ruler's achievements. Mohenjo-Daro whispers something different. That power can be baked into the layout of streets, into the reliability of drains, into the fairness of shared standards, into the presence of wells on every corner, and baths open to many. The night air around you is very still. All the imagined voices have faded again, leaving only your own breathing and the soft background hush of the distant river. You walk slowly to the edge of the citadel and sit on a low step, letting your legs rest. From here, you can see both the higher structures around you and the lower city below, as if you are sitting between two worlds, the public and the private, the shared and the domestic. You think about how different that balance is from many other ancient places. In a world with no clear palace, where is the center of importance? Maybe it's here, in the arrangement of spaces rather than in a single throne. Maybe it's in the idea that bathing, grain, and gatherings are what deserve the best engineering and the highest ground. You close your eyes for a moment and listen inwards. Your breath comes in slowly, goes out slowly. The weight of your body presses gently against the step. The imagined bricks at your back feel cool and firm, as if they could support you for hours without complaint. Down in the dark grid of streets, countless doorways open onto courtyards like the one you visited earlier. In each, you picture a different household: a potter, a bead maker, a trader with connections far downriver, a family of farmers who come into the city on market days. None of them lives in a towering palace, but none of them seems shut out either. The comforts of the city, its drains, its wells, its baths, its straight roads, its careful storage of grain touch them all. You imagine walking through those houses one by one, noticing how similar their arrangements are. A central courtyard, rooms grouped around it, stairs leading up to a roof where night breezes blow. The sameness isn't boring, it's calming. It says, quietly, that life here followed patterns understood by everyone. On the citadel, the same principle holds. This isn't an acropolis crowned by temples and imposing statues. It's a raised neighborhood of useful spaces: baths, storerooms, halls, perhaps shrines whose details we no longer fully understand. You rise once more and take a slow circuit around the top of the mound. Everywhere you look, the bricks repeat their quiet rhythm. Even broken walls and eroded edges keep the straightness of the original plan. The mystery of no palace doesn't feel sharp anymore. It feels almost natural, as if this city simply chose to pour its skill and effort into shared structures rather than into one dazzling residence. Maybe there were leaders here. Almost certainly there were. But if they existed, they walked the same straight streets, drew water from the same wells, bathed in the same mingled pools of the Great Bath. Their homes, if larger, were not so enormous that we can easily pick them out now. Their pride seems to rest not in towering monuments, but in the quiet reliability of a city that just worked. You let that thought settle into you like warm sand. Then, slowly, you begin to walk back down the steps of the citadel. Each step downward feels like a deep breath out. The lights of the imagined city dim slightly. The stars overhead grow brighter. The sound of your footfalls blends with the memory of all those others who climbed and descended here for reasons that were always practical, always connected to daily life. At the bottom, you step once more onto the straight, low streets of the lower city. Ahead, a different neighborhood waits, perhaps a district of workshops where clay was shaped, metal was poured, beads were drilled, and seal stones were carved. There, in the tiny details of tools and trade, you'll see even more of how this palaceless city lived, through specialized skills, shared standards, and countless quiet acts of craft. For now, you pause at the foot of the mound, feeling the gentle heaviness in your limbs, the calm weight of the story so far. The citadel behind you does not gleam with royal power. It rests like a thoughtful brow above the city's eyes, a place for water, for grain, for gatherings, steady, practical, communal. When you're ready, you'll wander onward into the workshop streets, where the mystery of Mohenjo-Daro continues in the smallest, sleepiest details of everyday work. You stand for a moment at the base of the citadel mound, feeling the quiet weight of all you've just walked through: the great bath, the granary, the broad meeting halls. Then you turn your steps back toward the heart of the lower city, letting the slope of the road guide you gently down. The air feels a little warmer here, held between the walls of houses. The sky above is a narrow strip edged by straight rooftops. Somewhere in the distance, the low murmur of the river drifts in and out of hearing like a slow breath. Tonight, you angle not toward the sleepiest homes, but toward the part of Mohenjo-Daro where hands were busiest by day, the artisans' quarter. Even in this imagined night, you can feel its texture change as you walk. The street under your feet remains the same careful brickwork, but on either side, the walls tell a slightly different story. You see larger doorways braced with stout wooden frames, wide enough for carts or bundles to pass easily. You notice small heaps of broken potsherds near one corner, and the faint outline of circular kilns where fires once burned hot and steady. In the quiet dark, you step closer. To your right, a low building opens onto a yard where circular impressions dot the ground, places where pottery wheels might have stood. You imagine them by day, simple stone or wooden discs mounted on low posts, spinning under the steady pressure of feet and hands. You walk into the yard and kneel beside one of the shallow circles, tracing around it with a fingertip. You picture a potter there, bare feet planted on the packed earth, one hand steadying the clay, the other coaxing it upward as the wheel spins. The soft hiss of wet clay under fingers, the circular rhythm of the wheel turning and turning, each rotation smoothing imperfections, making walls thinner and more even. Around the yard, unfired pots would have sat in neat rows, their surfaces still pale and chalky. Water jars with wide, rounded shoulders. Storage vessels with narrow necks to keep out dust and insects. Small bowls for eating, larger ones for mixing, lids laid nearby like flat, waiting moons. In your mind, you fill the shelves again. You see the subtle fingerprints pressed into handles where they were joined to bodies. The slight variations in shape that prove each vessel was made by hand, not stamped by some impersonal mold. The potter's children, if there were children slipping in and out of the yard, tasked with carrying trimmed pots carefully to the drying racks, warned again and again to move slowly, slowly, slowly. You let the image soften until all that's left is the sense of steady, circular motion and the faint scent of damp clay. Beyond the potter's yard, the street bends slightly and leads you toward another cluster of low rooms. Here, the traces left behind look different. Tiny chips of carnelian and shell, fragments of steatite, the faint suggestion of drilled holes in beads that never made it into finished strings. You have stepped into the beadmaker's quarter. You stand at the threshold of one small workshop and let your eyes roam slowly over the floor. You imagine it not as bare earth and brick, but covered in fine dust, red where carnelian was shaped, white where shell was ground, gray where stone was smoothed. You sit down on an invisible stool and picture a bead maker at work in front of you. A shallow tray rests on their lap, catching tiny fragments. On it lies a small piece of rough stone, not remarkable at first glance. But under their hands, it begins to change. They hold a tool, perhaps a tiny copper drill tipped with hard grit, attached to a bow that moves back and forth in gentle strokes. With each pass, the drill bites a little deeper into the stone, carving a hole through its center. The sound is almost nothing. A minute, gritty whisper, the faintest scrape. Time passes slowly here. One bead is not finished in minutes, but in many careful moments, grinding, drilling, polishing. A single string of matching beads might represent hours or days of attention, each piece turned and checked, until it is smooth enough to please both the eye and the hand. You imagine trays of finished beads, warm, translucent carnelian, glowing like captured sunset. Soft, pale shell beads with faint lines from their life in the sea. Tiny, cylindrical steatite beads, later glazed in blues and greens that once shone like shallow river water under the sun. These beads will travel farther than the beadmaker ever does. Into the houses of merchants, onto the wrists and necks of people who trade in distant towns, maybe even beyond the Indus Valley itself, riding along trade routes that stretch out like quiet threads into lands you only half imagine. You exhale slowly, feeling how much patience is contained in a single bead. In another corner of the artisans' district, there would have been metalsmiths, people who knew how to coax shape and strength from copper and bronze. You follow the street until you see the suggestion of a hearth against the inside wall of a building, low and lined with brick. There, by day, charcoal would have glowed white-hot, bellows breathing air into the coals to raise the temperature. You picture it as gently as possible. The glow, not fierce, but steady. The faint shimmer of heated metal, the soft clink of tools laid down and picked up. Someone lifts a crucible, its handle wrapped in cloth, and tilts it slowly. Molten copper pours out in a glowing stream, filling shallow molds in the dust. Later, when the metal cools, those shapes become blades, chisels, needles, bangles. You imagine the tools that then return to other workshops, a potter's knife, a carpenter's chisel, a beadmaker's drill tip, each one made with care so that other people could do their careful work more easily. No palace wall rises above this quarter. No royal workshop is set apart on a special hill. Instead, the crafts of the city are woven into its ordinary streets, their products flowing quietly into every household that needs them. As you walk, a different kind of object begins to appear in your mind's eye, small, often no larger than a few centimeters across, yet full of meaning. Seal stones. You imagine a low room, its floor scattered with tiny stone chips. A craftsperson sits cross-legged near the wall, a half-finished seal in their hand. They turn it slowly, examining each side. One surface is being carved, an animal, perhaps a humpbacked bull, powerful and calm, or a strange, graceful creature that looks like a unicorn, long horn curving above its head. Above or beside it, small signs are being incised, the still mysterious characters of the Indus script. The carver's tool moves with absolute precision. A line here, no thicker than a hair. A curve there, elegantly shallow. A cluster of tiny marks that will later press into soft clay or wet sealing material, leaving behind a sharp, crisp impression. These seals will sit in the hands of traders and officials. They will be pressed onto bundles of goods, onto jars, onto doors that must remain closed until the right person arrives. Each seal is both a practical tool and a small piece of art personal identity compressed into a symbol an inch across. You picture rows of finished seals resting in a shallow tray, their carved faces turned up. Bulls, elephants, maybe rhinoceroses, goats, human figures, and signs whose meaning has not yet reawakened in our time. On another day, in another age, someone might argue about who controlled such seals, whether they represent merchants, priests, administrators, or leaders of some kind. But here, in this soft night, you only feel the quiet fact that they exist at all, and that they do so without any nearby palace facade shouting, "Mine." And to quote, the power in these objects is subtle. It lies in agreement, in recognition, in trust. A seal means that whoever uses it belongs to a system everyone understands, even if no single crowned figure stands above it. You leave the workshop in your mind and step back into the street. All around you, invisible now but once very real, were standardized measures, cubical weights of chert or other stone made to precise ratios, used again and again to weigh grain, metals, textiles, oils. You imagine a scale set up on a low brick ledge. On one pan, a merchant places a small, standard weight, a perfect little cube that always feels the same in the hand. On the other, they pour grain or place metal until the arms balance. The beam settles into a state of calm level. This is another kind of quiet power. Not the power to command armies, but the power to make sure everyone agrees on what a measure means. What a certain weight of barley is worth. How much copper equals how much cloth. The more you walk through this city, the more you feel that its strength was not in a single person's name, but in shared habits, shared standards, shared ways of doing things. Your steps slow. You realize how soothing that is to imagine a place where life runs on known patterns, where your water will come from a well built to a familiar form, where your street will drain properly when it rains, where your neighbor's house is arranged much like yours, where the measure of your grain and the weight of your beads are trusted beyond your own doorway. You pass the dim outlines of what were once shop fronts or open stalls. You picture small counters here, facing the street, shaded by simple awnings. By day, people would have stood in front of them, examining goods with unhurried hands, running fingers along the smooth curve of a new pot, lifting a string of beads to the light to see how they catch it, balancing a brass vessel on their palm, testing its weight. Coins of metal may not be common here, but value is still exchanged: grain, textiles, oil, beads, prepared foods, tools, raw materials. Everything is rooted in tangible things, in objects that can be seen, touched, weighed. No palace treasury hoards a glittering cache of silver and gold in a hidden room. Instead, the wealth of the city moves along these streets in quiet flows. Heavy sacks of grain on shoulders, jars of oil on carts, bundles of cloth across arms, strings of beads wrapped in cloth and tucked carefully into satchels. You can almost hear the daytime city now, even as you float through its peaceful night version. The murmur of bargaining voices, not sharp or desperate, just practiced, the rustle of textiles, the light, musical clatter of pottery, the calls of traders who know their neighbors well and do not need to shout, and beneath all that, the constant, low presence of the water drains carrying waste away, wells drawing clean water up, the Indus River itself breathing along the edge of the city. You reach a slightly wider junction where two streets cross at right angles. You pause in the intersection and turn slowly, taking in each direction in turn. North, more houses, their roofs forming an even skyline. South, perhaps the faint silhouette of the riverbank. East, the workshops you've just wandered through in your thoughts. West, the way you came from the citadel, its bulk now hidden behind the regular lines of the lower city. Standing here, it's hard to imagine a king processing down these streets with a glittering entourage. There is no ceremonial avenue lined with statues, no enormous gate carved with conquering scenes. Yet you don't feel the lack. You feel fullness instead. Fullness of craft. Fullness of care. Fullness of 1,000 small, repeated tasks that kept this place alive and comfortable for centuries. You begin walking again, choosing one narrow street almost at random. The bricks underfoot are familiar now. Their size, their spacing, the way they fit together in a pattern that doesn't draw attention to itself because it's simply always there. As you pass between high, blank walls, you think about how much of this city's life unfolded behind them. Inside, courtyards hosted family meals, work, rest, talk. Back rooms held storage jars, baskets, chests. Staircases led to roofs where people might have slept on hot nights, the wind moving over them as softly as it moves over you now. Maybe, somewhere, there were houses that were slightly larger homes of merchants whose trade extended far downriver, or of officials who dealt with weights and measures, seals and records. But even those larger homes seem to have been made of the same bricks, arranged in the same language of courts and rooms and wells. You feel no sudden leap from ordinary to impossibly grand. When no point where the city says, "Here, this is where the true person of importance begins." Whoa! Instead, importance seems diffused. In the skill of potters and beadmakers, in the reliability of standardized weights, in the invisible agreements that made shared baths, drains, wells, and streets possible. As you walk, your own body begins to share in that diffusion. Your shoulders loosen, your jaw unclenches, your breath slows to match the pace of your steps. You are not being hurried toward a climax or toward some sharp revelation. You are simply being walked gently through a way of living where most concerns are practical, where the biggest mysteries are quieter. How did people agree on all this? Who helped plan it? Why did they not need to announce themselves in stone? Far ahead, you glimpse the outline of another well at a street corner. A familiar friend now. You approach, and rest your hands lightly on its brick rim. You look down into darkness again, imagining the cool, unseen water waiting below. You think of how many homes depended on this well. How many mornings began with the creak of rope, the splash of a bucket piercing the stillness below, the drip of water from its sides as it was lifted. Every potter, beadmaker, metalsmith, weaver, trader, and farmer in this neighborhood needed this well or one like it. Clean water is the quiet center of their day. And again you notice it stands out here, accessible, part of the shared structure of the city, not hidden in the courtyard of some palace garden, not reserved for a narrow circle of elite. Your fingertips rest a little heavier on the bricks. The mystery of Mohenjo-Daro, the city with no obvious palaces, no longer feels like a puzzle that demands a sharp answer. It feels more like a soft question you can fall asleep beside. What if power didn't always need to be carved high and huge? What if it could drift through a place like this, carried in everyday agreements, arranged in careful city planning, expressed in wells, drains, baths, granaries, workshops, and open halls? You let the thought drift through you and then let it go, the way you might watch a single bead roll gently across a table before coming to rest. Around you, the city remains quiet. The bricks remain cool. The river continues its slow, unseen motion. From here, when you're ready, you will wander toward the more intimate parts of Mohenjo-Daro, again, into courtyards and sleeping rooms, into rooftops and night breezes, into the tiny habits that shaped family life in a city without kings. For now, you simply stand at the well, breathing slowly, feeling yourself, becoming just another soft presence in this ancient, carefully built place. You rest your hands on the cool bricks of the well a little longer, breathing slowly, letting the idea of shared water and shared habits sink into you like quiet rain soaking into earth. Then, when your body feels ready to move again, you straighten and turn back into the narrow street. This time, you don't wander toward workshops or broad intersections. You head toward the quieter veins of the city, the smaller lanes that lead into clusters of homes. As you walk, the walls on either side seem to draw closer, not in a threatening way, but in a way that feels protective. The night air carries a faint mixture of scents: baked clay, distant river, the ghost of cooking fires that once burned in courtyards and kitchens, now long cooled. You pause at a doorway that opens just a little onto the street. No wide steps, no carved pillars, just a simple threshold framed by brick and wood. You imagine it as it would have been at the end of a long day. Someone has swept this step. Someone has shaken dust from a mat. Someone has lifted a child over this threshold, or carried a basket of grain in, or poured water out into the drain just beyond the door. You step inside in your mind, crossing from the shared public rhythm of the street into the softer, more private pulse of a home in Mohenjo-Daro. The first thing you feel is the shift in space. The house wraps itself around an inner courtyard, small but open to the sky. The walls create a hollow square, with rooms tucked along the edges. In the center, packed earth or simple brick forms the floor, perhaps with a raised platform or a low hearth along one side. You stand for a moment in that courtyard, Above you, the rectangle of sky is deep and calm, stars scattered loosely across it. The walls rise up like steady, patient guardians. A faint breeze drifts down into the space, cooler here than on the street, kissing your face, your hands, your neck. By day, this courtyard would have been busy. Someone grinding grain on a flat stone, moving the upper stone back and forth in an easy, practiced rhythm. Someone kneading dough in a low basin, hands folding and pressing until the dough is smooth and elastic. Someone washing pots with sand and water, scrubbing until the surfaces are clean and faintly rough. You imagine that hum now, then let it fade. Tonight, the courtyard is quiet. A small oil lamp might have burned here hours ago, its flame flickering gently against the walls. Now, only traces remain, a faint dark stain where soot kissed brick, the memory of warm light lingering in the corners. You walk slowly along one side of the courtyard and step into a room. It is simple. The floor is smoothed, earth or brick. Along one wall, low platforms of mud, brick, or wood serve as beds or seats. A mat lies rolled in a corner. A woven basket sits near the door, its lid fitted carefully. You picture this room at the end of an ordinary day in the 1800s BCE. A woman sits on one of those platforms, braiding her hair, fingers moving with unthinking skill. A child lies on the floor, tracing patterns in dust with a fingertip, eyelids growing heavier. An older person, perhaps a grandparent, leans against the wall, telling a story in a low voice, the kind of story that doesn't demand attention, just offers images and gentle rhythms to fall asleep to. You can almost hear it, the soft rise and fall of that voice, the quiet questions of a child, and then, growing more spaced out as sleep edges nearer, the little bursts of laughter at familiar parts fading quickly into yawns. The story might be about a journey downriver to another city, Harappa, perhaps, or a smaller town where the streets feel similar but the faces are new. It might be about a flood from many years ago, when the river rose and people carried their belongings to higher ground. It might be about a time when a caravan from far away came with beads and shells and strange fragrant resins. Whatever the tale, it is rooted in the same kind of world you've been walking through, a world of bricks and wells, of boats and fields, of work and rest, of days that look similar from a distance but feel unique as you live them. You let that imagined voice wash over you like a tide, then recede. You turn back toward the courtyard and step into another room. This one used more for storage and preparation. On shelves along the wall, large jars rest in simple rows. Their bellies are rounded, necks narrower, mouths sealed with lids of clay or cloth and string. You imagine what they hold. Grain wheat or barley, dried and stored to become future bread and porridge. Lentils and peas, small and firm, waiting to soften in water and heat. Oil, gleaming in the lamplight, carried up river or pressed from seeds in some courtyard or workshop. You picture someone lifting a lid and plunging a hand into cool grain, letting it run through their fingers with a soft hiss. You imagine measuring out what is needed, returning the rest, sealing the jar again. Nearby, Flat stones bear scars from pounding and grinding. A small pile of husks lies in a corner, swept neatly aside to be used in some other way or carried out later. Nothing in this room is precious on its own. Yet everything together is treasure, the quiet wealth that keeps a household fed. Not gold, but grain. Not jewels, but jars. Not luxury, but enough. You walk back into the open square of the courtyard. In one corner, you notice a narrow staircase hugging the wall steep, simple steps made from the same bricks as everything else. They lead upward toward the roof. You place your hand lightly against the wall and climb slowly, one step at a time. As you rise, the sounds of the city shift around you. The street noise drops away even further. The faint whisper of the river grows clearer. The soft rustle of night air across rooftops begins to wrap itself around you. When you reach the top, you step out onto the flat roof of the house. The surface under your feet is firm and slightly rough, a mix of brick and packed material smoothed by years of use. Low parapet walls line the edges, making the space feel safely enclosed despite its height. You stand near the center and turn slowly, taking in the view. All around you, other roofs stretch out in regular rows, like a quiet, sleeping landscape of flat plains and straight lines. Some have small parapets, some simple edges. A few show the outline of jars or bundles left near corners resting for the night. From here, Mohenjo-Daro feels less like a collection of separate buildings and more like a single, vast, breathing organism. A continuous surface, dotted with structures, all sharing the same foundation. You breathe in. The air is cooler up here, brushed clean by gentle wind. The smell of the city has changed, less clay and enclosed air, more river, more distant earth, more faint notes of plants growing wherever they can. You picture how these roofs would have looked in the heat of a long-ago summer day. Mats spread out with grain drying in the sun. People sitting in patches of shade, weaving baskets or mending clothes. Children playing quiet games, rolling small clay balls, hopping between chalked squares, watching boats move along the river's shining surface. At night, on the warmest evenings, sleeping mats might have been brought up here. Bodies arranged like quiet punctuation marks against the vast text of the sky. Conversations fading gradually into shared silence, then into sleep. Tonight, in your imagination, the roof is yours. You walk slowly to the parapet and rest your hands on it, palms flat against the brick. You lean forward just enough to look down into the street below. It feels as if the whole city is holding its breath. No torches flare. No drums beat. No processions move through the night to announce the power of a palace. Instead, the power here is softer. It is in 1,000 quiet decisions, where to place a well so everyone can reach it, how to align streets so drains run straight and true, how to size bricks so every wall fits together neatly, whoever builds it, how to set platforms and courtyards so air can circulate and heat can escape. You tilt your head back and let your gaze climb into the sky. The stars above Mohenjo-Daro are sharp and steady, unaffected by centuries. Somewhere in the same band of stars, people in your own time look up and see them too. But there are no city lights here to drown them out. They burn in the darkness like patient, watching eyes. You imagine families on neighboring roofs, separated from you by time, but very close in feeling. A mother pointing out a particular star to a child, telling them that traders once followed it along the river. Someone lying on their back, hands folded on their chest, letting questions drift through their mind. Will the rains come on time this year? Will the grain be enough? Will the boat return safely from the delta? These questions are not so different from the ones you might ask about your own life, but here they move more slowly, like the river that curves past the city, never in a hurry, always arriving. You sit down on the roof, legs stretched out in front of you, back resting against the parapet. You imagine the cool roughness under your palms, the warmth still held in the bricks from the day's sun, slowly bleeding into the night. The slight unevenness under your weight, a reminder that even in such a carefully planned city, everything still bears the mark of human hands. From this vantage, the absence of palaces feels even more remarkable and even more peaceful. You scan the horizon line of rooftops, looking for any towering structure that might have once shouted, "Here is the palace, here is the one who rules." Mohenjo-Daro, there is none. You know, from modern excavations, that large buildings sit on the citadel mound baths, halls, granaries, spaces for gatherings, for administration, for shared rituals. But from here, what you see are mostly homes and workshops, similar in shape and size, forming a pattern more like woven cloth than like a pyramid of status. It's as if the city's guiding idea was not raise one person above all, but make a place where many can live well together. Which is go. You let that idea settle on you like a second night breeze. Then your attention drifts to the small details of the roof itself. Perhaps a jar sits near the parapet, its lid tied down. Inside, pickled vegetables or preserved fruit wait patiently, flavor deepening day by day. Perhaps a coiled length of rope rests against one wall, smelling faintly of fiber and use, ready to be tied to a bucket or a bundle at a moment's notice. Perhaps a simple wooden stool stands near a patch where the bricks are smoothest, a favorite sitting spot where someone comes each evening to feel the air and watch the changing sky. Every object, however ordinary, carries the memory of regular hands. Hands that lifted, tied, scraped, mended. Hands that kneaded dough and braided hair. Hands that carried water and patted new bricks into place. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the entire city as a set of pulses rather than a set of walls. The pulse of footsteps on brick streets in the cooler hours of morning, the pulse of grinding stones turning and turning, making flour from grain, the pulse of looms and needles, of bead drills and potter's wheels, the pulse of breaths, of heartbeats, of people lying down at night on platforms and mats and roofs, trusting that tomorrow will come much like today. Somewhere in the pattern of these pulses, decisions were made. Someone, or perhaps many someones, decided how wide the streets should be, how thick to make the walls of the great bath so water would not leak, how to align the wells and drains so that water could be shared and waste carried away. How to set the city's grid so that streets met at right angles, giving the whole place a sense of order. And yet, whoever these planners were, they did not carve their names and faces into stone, did not build a palace throne above the city's life. It is almost as if the city itself, in its layout and habits, was the monument. You breathe in deeply, then let your exhale lengthen, your chest emptying more fully. Your body begins to mirror the city's calm. Your muscles loosen the way its streets loosen into narrow lanes. Your thoughts slow the way its river curves in broad, unhurried arcs. On another night, perhaps, someone would have moved across this roof to check the sky, to see if clouds were gathering, to sense whether wind had shifted, hinting at rain or flood. Tonight, in your imagination, the sky is clear. The stars stand quietly in their places. The air is still, only lightly stirred now and then by a breeze that wouldn't trouble a lamp flame. You picture for a moment a group of people gathered on a neighboring roof. Not a court, not a council in robes and crowns, but a simple family span, a child leaning against a parent's side, an older relative wrapped in a cloth, knees drawn up, another adult sitting cross-legged, holding a small clay lamp cupped in both hands. They talk softly about everyday things. How the fields look today outside the city. What the trader from upriver said about distant towns. How much grain is left in the jars. Whether the young boy next door will become a potter like his mother or a boatman like his uncle. Their words rise in small wisps, then dissolve into the night, the way your own thoughts are beginning to. You realize that, in a city without palaces, stories like these might have been the true epic, small, domestic, repeated in 1,000 courtyards and on 1,000 roofs, weaving a social fabric that didn't need a throne at its center to hold together. Your back relaxes more fully into the parapet. Your shoulders slide down an invisible notch. Your jaw softens. Even your eyes, which have been taking in the brick lines, the roof edges, the stars, begin to grow heavier, more content to simply rest. You let your awareness drift back down through the house beneath you, down through the roof, into the rooms, into the courtyard where a lamp has gone out, leaving only the memory of its glow, into the storage room with its patient jars, into the sleeping room where mats are laid out, where breaths deepen and even. In one of those rooms, you imagine yourself lying down on a simple platform, a woven mat between you and the brick, a cloth between you and the night air, the faint smell of baked earth and clean skin and stored grain, comforting, not strange. You feel the city's quiet arrangement holding you, just as surely as the walls hold the roof, and the bricks hold the streets, and the drains hold the flow of water. There is no king to protect you here, no towering palace to justify your sleep. Instead, your safety comes from something gentler and more diffuse, from the knowledge that wells and drains and streets and houses are all where they should be, from the sense that the same habits will greet you tomorrow, a bucket at the well, a pot on the hearth, a measured weight on a scale, a familiar route through the streets. From the feeling that you are part of a pattern larger than yourself, but not crushed by it, you breathe with that pattern now. In, slow and deep, as if drawing from the cool water of the wells. Out, long and soft, as if letting the river carry away everything heavy you no longer need to hold. The mystery of the city with no palaces lies all around you, but it is not demanding. It is content to remain partly unanswered, to sit like a seal stone with unread signs, quietly powerful even if its inscription is not yet understood. You let that be enough. The roof you sit on, the courtyard below, the jars, the beds, the wells, the workshops, the baths, the granaries, the streets. It is all one vast resting shape under the stars, and you are resting within it like a single, small, peaceful thought inside a very old and gentle mind. For a while, you just sit there on the roof, letting your breathing match the slowness of the city around you. Then, very gradually, like someone who knows there is no need to rush, you imagine yourself rising to your feet again. You brush your palms lightly against your clothes, feel the cool grain of the parapet beneath your fingertips one last time, and walk back toward the top of the narrow stair. As you descend, the night air grows slightly warmer, more enclosed. The sky slips away above you, replaced by brick and shadow, by the familiar hollow of the courtyard. You step down into it again, the open square of floor holding the quiet of the house like a bowl holds water. For a moment, you stand there. A small patch of sky still watches from above, its rectangle darker now, a few stars still visible at the edges. The walls around you rise up steadily, patient as ever. You feel as if the house itself is breathing very slowly, in and out with the people who once slept here. You walk back through the doorway and out toward the street. Crossing the threshold, you feel another shift. The house lets you go. The city takes you back. Outside, Mohenjo-Daro is as calm as when you left it. The streets are mostly empty in your imagination now, the day's late walkers already behind their doors. Drains run silently beside the brick paths, carrying away the last traces of water poured out in the evening. Doorways rest like closed eyes, their lintels and thresholds worn by countless hands and feet. You stand for a moment at the mouth of the lane and look both ways. To your left, the street stretches into darker silence, lined by rows of modest houses and workshops. To your right, the slope begins to rise gently, hinting at the higher ground where the great bath and public buildings wait. You turn toward that slow incline. Your steps are unhurried. Each footfall on the baked bricks feels stable, as if the ground has rehearsed this walk many times and knows exactly how to support you. The faint texture of the street presses against the soles of your feet through your sandals or imagined shoes, a quiet reminder that this city was built with bare hands, shaping clay one brick at a time. As you walk, you begin to notice small details that reveal the order beneath the stillness. Streets cross each other at clean angles, as if someone once drew this place on a flat surface before it was ever raised in 3 dimensions. Drains run straight and true beneath the edges, covered with fitted slabs, their outlets carefully placed. Here and there, steps rise from the road to meet the doorway of a house, each step made from the same standard bricks, each riser nearly the same height, as if the city's builders agreed on how much effort a climbing foot should have to make. You realize that, in a way, this city is a kind of quiet law, not a law written on stone tablets or shouted by heralds, but a law expressed in regular bricks, set distances, repeated patterns. A law that says, let the street be wide enough for people and carts. Well, let water be easy to reach and waste easy to lose. Aye, let houses line the roads in an orderly fashion so everyone knows where they are in the city. Well, and still, nowhere, not even here, in the upper part of the city, does the law say, raise one person a head taller than all others. Is this, you climb gently upward, the ground levels out, and ahead you see the faint outline of a massive structure, its walls thick and purposeful. You are approaching the area where modern archaeologists call the Great Bath, and other public buildings cluster around it, the closest things Mohenjo-Daro has to monumental architecture. As you draw nearer, the scale changes. The bricks are still familiar, still of the same type and size, but now they form larger spaces, wider platforms, deeper tanks. You step up onto a raised walkway, feeling the difference under your feet, a slight change in height and perspective, as if you are being invited to look at the city from another angle, not as a house dweller, but as part of the many who gather. Ahead, the shape of the Great Bath appears more clearly. A large, sunken rectangle, lined with carefully laid bricks and sealed with thick layers, designed to hold water without leak or waste. Broad steps descend into it from both ends, meeting at the pool's quiet floor. Around it, colonnades and rooms form a frame, like hands cupped gently around a precious basin. You walk to the edge and rest your palms on the low parapet. In your mind, there is water here. Not today's water, not any particular days, just the idea of water held in this space, again and again over many seasons. By day, people might have come here in small groups, to bathe in a careful way, to perform a ritual before some important activity, to cleanse mind and body after a journey or before a feast. The water would have caught sunlight in glittering fragments, rippling gently as feet and hands moved through it. Voices would have echoed softly off the enclosing walls, never raised, only murmuring. At night, as you stand there now, the pool lies calm. No water moves. No lamps burn along the edges. Instead, the Great Bath itself feels like a deep, cool breath in the middle of the city, a single long inhale that is still being held. You imagine how it must have felt to step into that water centuries ago. Feet touching cool stone, hands trailing along the walls, the body gradually enveloped, first ankles, then knees, then waist, shoulders, neck. Perhaps there were quiet rules about how to enter. A certain stair to go down, another to come up, a particular way to move to avoid splashing others, a certain silence or chant kept around the space. Whatever the practice, it was shared. This bath is not hidden behind palace walls. It sits within reach of many feet, many voices. You let your fingertips slide along the parapet as if touching the surface of still water, feeling the coolness soak into your hands. All around this structure, other buildings rise, some called granaries, some called assembly halls by those who excavated them. You picture one such hall now. A large space, roofed, its floor level and wide. Rows of square brick platforms or low foundations stand in neat patterns, suggesting storage, seating, or some other function that invited people to gather. You step into that space in your mind. The air feels different here, more enclosed, more resonant. A whisper might travel from one end to the other if the room is still enough. Perhaps goods were stored here, grain sorted and weighed, ready for distribution. Perhaps people met to resolve disputes, to discuss trade, to plan repairs after a flood. Perhaps scribes or officials sat at low tables, their hands moving carefully over clay tablets or damp seals, pressing the city's symbols into soft surfaces that would later harden into records. You can almost hear the clink of weights on a scale. In one corner of your imagination, a merchant sets a standardized stone weight on one pan. On the other, grain or metal or beads are added, little by little, until balance is reached. No one person's guess decides the measure. The scale does. The city's shared system of weights and measures turns private deals into mutual trust. This, too, is a kind of soft power. Not the power of a crown, but the power of agreement, of systems quietly followed by everyone. We will all use these weights. We will all trust these measures. We will all walk streets laid out in this pattern, draw water from these wells, pour it into these drains. Do you imagine yourself lifting one of those ancient weights in your hand? It is small, dense, smooth from handling. It fits just so in your palm, neither too big nor too small, crafted to match identical pieces used in other corners of the city and in other cities up and down the river. Holding it, you feel something quietly profound. This little piece of stone or terracotta allowed people who had never met each other to trade fairly. A farmer from a nearby village, a merchant from a distant town, a craftsperson from another district. They could all step into a marketplace, see the same weights and measures, and know, yes, this is right. Yes, this is fair. With this daughter, the fairness doesn't come from someone in a palace saying so. It comes from the shared tools everyone agrees to use. You let that thought settle inside you like grain settling into a jar. Nearby, you imagine a small table where seals are kept. Each seal is carved with care. Perhaps a unicorn-like animal, long-horned and self-contained. Perhaps a bull, powerful and grounded. Perhaps a pattern of lines and symbols arranged in a short, concise script that no one yet fully reads. Someone takes a small seal in hand, presses it into soft clay attached to a storage jar or a bundle. When they lift it away, a crisp impression remains: animal, symbols, a mark of identity. Not a portrait of a king, but a sign of a family, a merchant, a workshop, a household. The city's marks do not gather into one face. They spread outward into many. You think again of how unusual this is among ancient cities. Elsewhere, it is often the names of rulers that survive. Monuments carved with boasts. Palaces layered with decorations praising a single person or dynasty. Here, in Mohenjo-Daro, the faces that remain are both less and more than that. A seal with an animal, a script no one can yet read. Thousands of standard bricks, carefully laid drains, wells that drop straight down to cool water. The city's identity is not a single figure, it is a pattern of shared choices. You feel your own breathing slip into that pattern. Steady, repeated, unhurried. In, out, in, out. You walk slowly back toward the open air outside the hall. Returning to the top of the citadel mound, you look down over the lower city. Rows of houses, intersecting streets, the faint gleam of where drains once carried water and waste. In your mind, the night is deep now. Most households are asleep. On the ground level, people lie on platforms inside rooms where the air is still and familiar, the smell of home strong and comforting. On rooftops, some may be stretched out under the open sky, quilts or cloths pulled up around them, letting the breeze brush across their faces. Breaths rise and fall all over the city like a single, vast, slow tide. You imagine, just for a moment, that you could hear them all together. Not as a loud sound, but as a soft, collective presence. A texture in the night air, like the barely audible rustle of a distant field, or the almost soundless movement of water against the riverbank. From this vantage, the missing palace no longer feels like an absence. It feels like a deliberate quiet. The city does not point upward to one room, one throne, one face. It points outward, to many courtyards, to many jars, to many wells and doorways and hearths. The true monument here is the ordinary day, repeated many times. A hand reaching for a bucket, feet carrying grain to a storeroom, voices bargaining gently in a marketplace, children watching boats move along the Indus, neighbors sharing news at the well, hands lifting lids from jars, measuring out enough, saving the rest. You take a step back from the view and gradually begin to walk down from the mound, following a slightly different path this time, just as someone living here might have taken a slightly different route home on a familiar night. Streets tilt downward, bricks underfoot guiding you. On one corner, you picture a cluster of small stalls by day. Perhaps they would be stacked with baskets of grain, trays of beads, bundles of cloth, jars of oil or honey. Now, their platforms are empty in your mind, surfaces smooth and resting, waiting for tomorrow's goods. You pass another well. Even in the dark, you know its shape by now. The ring of bricks. The raised lip worn by ropes and hands. The faint coolness that seems to hover above the opening. You pause there once more, because this place, these wells, hold so much of what makes this city unique. Everyone needs water. Everyone draws from these openings. Everyone's arms have known the weight of a full bucket, the careful lift, the steady walk back home, the pour into jars or basins. If any idea holds this city together, it might be this. Life is shared. Not in a dramatic, shouted way, but in the quiet fact of wells and streets and drains and baths and weights and jars. You let your fingers trace the curve of the well's edge in your mind, then move on. The houses you pass feel more familiar now. You can guess, by a doorway's height or a wall's thickness, where a courtyard might be, where a stair might rise, where a room might open. You have walked through enough in your imagination to sense their rhythm. They are not palaces. They are not grand villas. They are ordinary homes made with care, following a pattern that allowed thousands of people to live side by side without stepping on each other's lives too harshly. As you walk, your thoughts slow further, like boats drifting closer to the bank. You no longer need to picture every brick, every door, every tool. It is enough to know they are there, resting with you. Gradually, your path returns you to a quieter part of the city. The streets narrow slightly. The air feels gently enclosed again, carrying traces of clay, cooled earth, faint smoke. You picture, somewhere nearby, the house you visited earlier, the courtyard, the rooms, the rooftop. You don't need to enter it again. Simply knowing it exists, that it is waiting there in your imagination with its jars and mats and platforms, is deeply soothing. You let the city fade slightly out of focus. The bricks blur into a warm, earthy background. The streets become soft lines instead of sharp edges. The wells and baths and halls turn into comforting shapes, like pillows placed in the mind. What remains clear is the feeling of Mohenjo-Daro at night, orderly but not rigid, quiet but not empty, shared but still full of individual lives. A city that, somehow, managed to flourish without palaces shouting from its skyline. A place where power may have been spread out like grain in many jars, like water in many wells, like light in many lamps. You breathe that in, out, in, out. The mystery of why no palaces softens into something like this. Maybe the greatest monument here was never meant to be a building. Maybe it was meant to be a way of living together, a way where streets are straight, wells are many, baths are shared, measures are fair, and homes, though modest, are carefully made. A way where no one person's name needed to be carved on every wall for the city to work. You feel your own body responding to that idea. Your shoulders ease as if setting down burdens you didn't realize you were carrying. Your chest loosens, each breath expanding more smoothly. Muscles in your face relax, letting the skin around your eyes and mouth soften. You no longer need to walk through the city step by step. Instead, you let the whole of Mohenjo-Daro become a single gentle image, an ancient grid of streets, quiet wells gleaming with starlight, flat roofs resting under a deep, dark sky, a wide bath lying still, homes gathered close together like cupped hands around sleeping lives. You place yourself somewhere within that image, on a roof, in a courtyard, near a well, or on a quiet street. Wherever you choose, the city holds you. Under your back or under your feet, you feel the sturdy familiarity of brick and earth. Around you, you sense the presence of many other sleepers, each in their own small space, sharing the same broader world. Above you, the stars shine as they did 4,000 years ago, indifferent to time, patient and steady. You don't need to solve anything now. Not the mystery of vanished script, not the question of rulers and governance, not the fate of the city or the river's changing course. All of that can rest like tools laid down at the end of a long day, like jars sealed after the grain is stored, like lamps snuffed after the last story is told. You, too, can rest. You let your inner sight dim, as if the lamps of Mohenjo-Daro are being turned down one by one. A light in a courtyard gently covered. A lamp by a stair pinched out. A flame beside a well allowed to gutter and fade. The great bath lies in shadow now. The halls and granaries sink into deeper dark. The rooftops blend with the sky. Only the faintest glimmers remain, a star reflected in an unseen puddle, a hint of moonlight tracing the top of a parapet, the soft glow of your own awareness, quietly observing and then growing sleepier, softer, slower. You feel your body as if it were lying on a simple, solid platform inside one of those brick houses. There's a mat beneath you, a light cloth over you, a familiar wall at your back, the faintest stir of air on your face. Outside, somewhere, the Indus flows, endless and calm, long after cities rise and fall. Inside, your breath flows in the same way. In, out, in, out. You give yourself permission to let go now. To stop following every word. To stop watching every scene. To let Mohenjo-Daro drift slowly away, like a boat turning a bend in the river, moving out of sight but not out of existence. The city will still be there in your imagination, and in the earth, and in stones under the sun. You can walk its streets again another night, if you wish. For now, all you need to do is rest. Like the wells, like the roofs, like the bath, like the bricks, like the people who once lived here and lay down at the end of their long, gentle days. You are safe. You are warm enough. You are held in a world that, for this moment, asks nothing of you. You feel sleep approaching the way dawn approaches a quiet city, softly, gradually, without any need for alarm or command. If thoughts come, let them pass down your mind, the way water moves down the drains of Mohenjo-Daro, guided, untroubled, carried away. With each breath, your body becomes heavier, more relaxed. Your arms sink. Your legs soften. Your spine loosens into whatever supports you. You might imagine one last time that you are lying on a warm, flat roof or in a cool, shaded room in this ancient city with no palaces. Brick under you, sky above you. Simple lives breathing all around you. Then you let even that image go, dissolving into a calm, dark, endless rest. Like the river at night, like the fields under starlight, like the city itself, sleeping quietly long after the last lamp has gone out. You don't have to do anything more. Sleep can find you now,